and welcome back to Hey Eintracht Frankfurt. This is the Bundesliga podcast, covering everything there is to know the English language about Eintracht Frankfurt, the best club in the Bundesliga, the best club in Germany, the best club in Europe, the best club in the world for that matter. I are a bit biased. Brian and Casey back again with another interview special. Now, this gentleman who's joining me is he's got a hugely diverse background in terms of local lower league American soccer, in addition to having a very sharp wit that gets him onto the likes of TalkSport, where, as myself, I'm stuck talking to you guys most of the time. So, without further ado, Kartik Krishnaiyer of the World Soccer Talk and Podcast and TalkSport. Hello, and welcome to Hey Eintracht Frankfurt.
Hey, great to be with you, Brian.
Well, it's my pleasure to have you on. You've been a cheerleader of sorts for the Bundesliga when the Bundesliga has been in a position to cheer for themselves, and yet it's kind of like when a tree falls in the middle of the forest, does anyone hear it sort of thing when it comes to the Bundesliga. It's a shame because it's such a wonderful thing to follow, but then again, I happen to cheer for a club that happens to be one of those clubs that, hey, when they falter, does anyone notice? And yet, when we are going full gun blazing, suddenly we are one of the loudest fan bases that can possibly be heard across Europe.
Yeah, and of course, when you won the Pokal a couple of years ago, that was just an unbelievable story, right? And had an unbelievable feeling for the club, for the city, for fans across the world. Because I think Frankfurt is such a known place because, again, commercial considerations, airline hub. If you fly Lufthansa, I've flown Lufthansa a bunch in my life. I mean, I've gone through Frankfurt, at least in terms of like connecting. It's like going through Atlanta or Chicago in the U.S. So it was really neat, and it was even bigger when they won the Europa League. And I was actually at the Liverpool Academy in South Florida, watching that final when they lifted that trophy, and there was just there was a spirit and something that even captured these very kind of British people who would have been rooting for Rangers, right? So that was pretty amazing. Coming up on
the
2
English
years
Scottish thing. Would they have the English skin?
I guess the people. So yes, I think that was part of it, and then you have some Scots also working there, but they may have been Celtic fans.
Oh yes, I was contacted before headed out to my local beer hall where I watch every Eintracht Frankfurt match. Had everything ready, and then I get a message about 5 minutes ahead of kickoff time, and they're like, "Hey, Brian, the Celtic fans are actually meeting up just to watch you kick the butt of Rangers." And I'm like, "So you wanted me to go here and be with you guys?" And figure that the next time they had an Old Firm derby, I show up in my Eintracht Pokal winners t-shirt and Pokal winners scarf, and they're like, "He's not drinking here today. He's not paying for his drink. They're all on us." And I'm like, man, I could totally go to the right part of Glasgow and never have to buy a pint of beer or a bite to eat. I just got to make sure which side of the tracks I am on.
Right. Yeah. And this is very different than the U.S., where we have some sort of culture where it's very weird. Like all the MLS fans will root for another MLS team in continental competition. I still don't quite I can't get my heads around that. Why rivals of Columbus would like to see them win in CONCACAF. But that's the way it is here, I guess.
I think that's mostly down, if I can put it, a tiny sense of, hey, we need to prove ourselves. We're this, by comparison to everybody else, a real startup sort of league, even though the league, 1996 is not really that long ago now. I think there's this inferiority complex that can sometimes get in the way of folks, being able to have that tribalism that can drive the passion, drive interest for a lot of people. And they're just like, you know what, if the level of the water lifts up everybody else, then everything else will be, nice and gravy. Well, if I'm more of in the sense that, Bayern, you can get to that Champions League final, and I hope you get pumped 9-0 by whomever shows up there, just to make sure you don't win another trophy.
Yeah.
Even though, as I say that, I realize that if that was to happen And this year, that would mean that it has to be either Borussia Dortmund, who, do we really want to pump their tires any more than it seems like a lot of other people do? It's just Eintracht and me not wanting to get everyone so inflated. And the other option will be Paris Saint-Germain. So kind of bitter pill to swallow either way. If you're an Eintracht fan, you're just glad that the UEFA coefficient is going to be as high as it is. And so long as Leverkusen kind of does what they're currently doing, Dortmund and Bayern don't even need to make the Champions League final. And 5 teams will go into Champions League along with the next 3 places, because let's be real, Leverkusen is not losing to Kaiserslautern in the DFB Pokal, especially not this Kaiserslautern team. And that will mean, 1 through 8 for the Bundesliga will be participating in Europe, and guarantees Eintracht is basically going to Europe. So, I'm just looking out for my own self-interest in that category.
Yeah, and I think it's just in general really good for the Bundesliga that Leverkusen is playing at this high a level. They have a chance to win a treble, right? They've got Roma, who they lost to in the same spot last year, but were the better team over those 2 legs. I think they have a real shot to beat them. It is amazing. They have a really good chance to do this. Now the undefeated season, all of that is being talked about. They've got Stuttgart still. I don't know if this undefeated thing, this invincible thing, is a distraction. I was almost hoping maybe they would lose to Dortmund and just get that done with, and then focus on the Pokal final and Europa League. But hey, maybe they can do it, and that would be even more amazing, wouldn't it?
Exactly. And the one thing that I think is really kind of key right now for the Bundesliga is having, 2 European competitions where they're doing exceedingly well. And so if you go back to when Eintracht in 22 won the Europa League, well, everyone was out at the semifinal stage, and there was only the 2 competitions at the time, and it had been since the COVID year that the last time that you had a German team kind of making the semifinals, which Bayern did. Actually, I think Leipzig make the semifinals.
Yeah, Leipzig made the semifinals that year. Yeah,
and then and that was when it was just the one-off matches. Golly, I'm now remembering that. I think Lyon, out of all the teams, one who faced off against Leipzig in the quarterfinals after they upset Manchester City. Their 2020 in terms of European activity was just threw up some randomness in terms of those results, and Bayern was able to benefit from it. And that Bayern team would now probably give, I think they'd have a few more points on the total of the season, but I don't think that Bayern team, who was a very good team on Hasefoot, I don't think that Bayern team would be Leverkusen. I think Leverkusen is really that good.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with that, and I think that Leverkusen team, this Leverkusen team, is actually doing it in a stronger Bundesliga than that Bayern team. And that Bayern, that's, I think, the one year was 2020 would be the one year that they cleared 80 points recently, because I remember the 18-19 season, they had 78 points, and Dortmund ran them till the last match, although let's keep in mind that was the year that when they had the chance to pull away, Dortmund went to Munich and lost 5-0. Something similar happened last season, right? But they were both on 71 points last season, and I want to say in the 22 season it was only 75 or 76 points for Bayern. So it's been actually a while since a Bundesliga team got to 80. It was that strange COVID year. So if you take that out of it, it's been since 2018, and I think the league is stronger now, top to bottom. And so you've got a situation where this Leverkusen team is just firing on all cylinders. I mean, they are, in my opinion, at this point, the best team in Europe. And I know that's saying a lot, but we won't get to see them head to head with the sides in Champions League, and those are one-off matches anyway, or one-off two-leg ties. But I think over the course of August to now, they are the best team on the continent.
Yeah, I look at the team that Leverkusen is right now, and you never know what exactly iteration of themselves, despite everyone basically saying, I'm coming back to run it back, as they say. Not anyone who knows me, I realize the being a Kansas City Chiefs fan that I'm kind of rubbing it in there a tiny bit with the whole that being kind of the moniker that we ran with. And you know what? Give me all the grief that you want. But the idea of Leverkusen being able to keep up that same sort of mojo. I mean, Pep Guardiola, at times, they would have that in his second and third seasons, but, you know, there were more cracks that were shown in the second and third season from Guardiola when it came to his competition with, you know, the rest of the Bundesliga, and that wasn't there in the first season. Kind of how you just get used to someone new and you find out how to defeat them. But I think that by the time that Leverkusen comes into the Champions League, that more teams from the rest of Europe will be able to catch on with how to combat that sort of thing. So if you want to look at the way that Borussia Dortmund, you know, they made the Champions League final in 2013 versus Bayern Munich in London, coincidentally where this upcoming Champions League final is being played. So we could have that reunion all over again. Oh boy. But I look at Leverkusen and I'm like, this team is a special team. And they were able to, with Dortmund, with Leipzig, with, maybe not Wolfsburg, but with Bayern all drastically outspending Leverkusen. Leverkusen was able to, with the right coach and the right sort of investment. I do realize that, you know, they do have that Bayern connection, even though the kind of funneling of money is not to the Wolfsburg or the Leipzig ways. Leverkusen has been able to create a winning team that is going to be remembered for years and years, and happens to be finally that team that is able to make sure that Bayern doesn't lift the Meisterschale at the end of the season. And it should be a hint to clubs like Eintracht, Traditionsvereins, or Köln. Well, okay, maybe Köln's a bad example considering their position currently in the league, or to Gladbach, you know, that, hey, you know what? You can do this. You can compete. And I know that at times we've seen these guys compete for, you know, these trophies. But the fact of the matter is, no one had done it. And I think that's what makes Leverkusen special, despite the fact that they come off as a non-Traditionsverein, despite the many years that the club has been, you know, in the Bundesliga and the performances for the Bundesliga when it's come to playing in Europe, where they make knockout phases.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I think Leverkusen. I spent some time there in 2016 at the club, and they're a selling club in spite of their corporate lineage, in spite of the Bayer company's support. They are a selling club that has had to flip players constantly. I mean, most recently, the likes of Kai Havertz and Heung-min Son, among others. You know, you go further back, you're talking about Mikhail Ballack and Lucio and Zé Roberto and all of these great players. And more often than not, it's been Bayern taking their guys. So they are also a selling club, but it shows like a selling club in the Bundesliga that has a good incubator of young talent, Florian Wirtz being the guy now. And then also does good scouting, gets guys like Grimaldo, gets guys like Patrick Schick. You can do it. And Leverkusen has always had a really good scouting network, and they've gotten good players. And in fact, they were probably one of the first clubs to exploit the U.S. market and had the likes of Claudio Reyna come through Leverkusen, and later Landon Donovan. He flopped at Leverkusen, but he was there. They were the club that scouted him. Frankie Hayduk, right. Frankie Hayduk came from Tampa Bay Mutiny in MLS. Played on that team with Zé Roberto, by the way. In fact, played with Zé Roberto kind of on the same line at one point. Played Hayduk on the left and Zé Roberto on the right. So, yeah, a lot of American players have gone through there, and in general, they've been very good at scouting.
100%. You're right. They utilize their extensive scouting network. They've also played in the occasional friendly here in the United States. I did think their one match in St. Louis was a little odd, despite the fact that they got to play in front of multiple members of the Bayer corporate family in St. Louis, whilst, one of the really well attended, friendly at that, but they always they seem to be, unlike many other Bundesliga clubs, way more forward thinking in terms of signing players. They brought in Chicharito for just 2 seasons, and while they're like, oh well, from a player standpoint, he was just okay, despite the fact that their fiscal balance sheet took a distinct notch uptick, and all the Deportes viewing numbers in Mexico and the United States just went kaboom through the roof. They do make a lot of moves that make a lot of sense that not everybody else in the Bundesliga makes. And I wonder if that is because they don't have perhaps they also adhere to 50+1 rulings. They don't, because of the non-enormous fan base. Because remember, when the company was founded, it was basically field with the first factory down and everything, and then they created the football club to be, the entertainment arm for, their factory workers. Because hey, we need these folks are bored out of their minds. We don't want them to, go to Cologne and probably, get into trouble in the big city. This be the entertainment for the locals who are at the factory, and the fan base, while not as big by any stretch of the margin, they seem to be way more forward, as I mentioned, forward thinking, but they don't seem to have the constant infighting that some other 50+1 clubs, and I'm thinking of Stuttgart specifically right now at this very moment in time, who will be doing well on the pitch, but behind the scenes it's a mess, and God forbid your club on the field is a mess. That makes everybody else start blaming this person and that person. Having infighting is never good for the long-term future of a club or success of a club. And I just kind of wonder, it's like, how is Leverkusen able, in your opinion, to make decisions one after the other?
Yeah, no, and they've been really smart and cut their losses. So Peter Bosch started pretty well there, remember? And when it went badly, they cut their losses. They didn't dither. They've done it with a couple other managers as well. They've been, they've been very smart at how they've done this, and they've also been very, very aggressive in the foreign player market to get value players. Not guys that are showing up on every transfer target list, but do their scouting, do their homework, get some values in the market. Even the purchase of Nathan Tella this year from Southampton, really good value for what they paid, and Frimpong, very good value for what they paid. So they really kind of gained the system. They're playing Moneyball to a certain extent.
It's the whole Moneyball aspect. It's the thing that makes everyone who is not a Bundesliga fan, who looks down the Bundesliga and gives them this tag of the Farmers League, which I think is a pretty poor representation of what the Bundesliga is. But let's switch over to Traditionsvereins, who do have models really kind of firmly entrenched in themselves, especially with the fact that, Bayern keeps on talking about, hey, for us as a league to get stronger, we need more money to be available to us. We need to go on tours. We need to, be more successful in Europe. How do you be more successful? You have better players. How do the better players go there? You don't have them be, just 1-2 year stopovers, sort of like, how I felt college basketball was for ages, until I think, honestly, NIL has sort of kind of rectified that, where you actually will see
I agree with
guys
that.
really log in a lot more years in college teams, despite kind of maneuvering here and there.
Guys doing 4 or 5 years actually in college basketball, which is really, really exciting. Honestly, I know people complained it's not all at the same school, but that's fine. The portal and NIL have allowed, I think, college basketball to revitalize itself in the last few years. Completely agree with that observation.
One thing that I then look at is Bayern talking all this big talk and Dortmund, as much as they love to applaud themselves as we're a great big 50+1 advocate, they realize, hey, we need this big Champions League money to keep on coming in. We need more money to basically just kind of keep up with the Joneses, because they look at Leipzig as we know that they're circumventing the things, but when there's only 17 members and they're able to control how they move, it's really it muddles the water, as you would say. The DFL, who runs the top two divisions of the German football pyramid, and most of the German football teams now currently residing in the top two divisions, have separated from the old days where, it was all one club with just various departments. The football departments have almost all to a T in the top two divisions. So basically have their football outfits have separated from the main club. They've separated as their own kind of a company entity that can kind of function outside to not have as much of the kind of, the head of the basketball department try and weigh in on, football matters, and vice versa, which, you'd see the benefits of that. But, with these clubs, they still adhere to the members. And when these leaders came together, they're like, how are we going to be able to drive the next, because TV is changing all the time. Like the landscape has, the big mover has been television money. The Premier League just dwarfs everybody, and everyone is just trying to keep their heads at second place, trying to keep yourself at second place so you're at least within touching distance for the big clubs to compete with the big behemoths who are participating in Europe. And I look at it from the standpoint that Iron kept on talking up, we need more of this, more of that. The teams who participate in Europe suddenly started thinking, you know what, that's not the worst thing in the world to have a little bit more money, but it felt like the DFL put forward this idea to get outside investment, sort of in the same manner that Barcelona leveraged these levers, as they call them, to bring in money to immediately be able to allow them to have more money available in the short term while sacrificing for the long term. And what the fans showed that they didn't like it. What was it that the Bundesliga clubs were really looking at that could have hammered them in the long term?
Yeah, and I think the outside investment would have it would have changed the character of the league, right? And I think it would have distanced supporters from the club. So 50+1, I don't think is going away, and I don't think private equity money, all of this, is preferable. And we look at what happened with Hertha Berlin, right? You had significant minority investment coming from private equity and from partners here in the U.S., actually my part of the U.S. in Florida. And effectively, the club just started acting like a big money club in the rest of the continent, throwing money at players, flipping the squad, running through coaches, eventually getting relegated. And that's and going from a position where they were qualifying for Europe, right? They were qualifying for Europa League to being relegated and really kind of become a basket case of a club. So I think we're looking at a scenario where there is real value to the way the structure is currently, and obviously very, very unlikely that we'll see changes after the protests we saw this past year, right? Over the past couple months, actually.
One of the things that was brought to the forefront, the DFL had said, hey, the money that will be invested here, it's gonna, some of the stuff it came off as good ideas. So they wanted to put forward money to allow your Bremens, your Augsburgs, your Herthas, your Schalkes, your Hamburgs, who the financial capabilities to kind of, fork over money on these big foreign preseason tours, to where they're hitting up the United States, they're hitting up Asia. You see that really from the likes of Bayern and Dortmund, almost exclusively these days. Eintracht has done, a couple here and there, but lower levels than the other guys. While there's been plenty of other teams, it seemed like that was a good idea, but I guess you could say that the preference to kind of keep things simple, keep things low key, kind of has made the DFL say, how do we expand ourselves? We got to put ourselves out there. It's not just in Europe that we need to kind of put ourselves out there. We need to go on these tours to, basically just self promote ourselves. Like, these weren't bad ideas from the DFL to, to put forward, to force their clubs to kind of get out there and show the world what they're all made of. This is a good idea, but just was just poor execution that the DFL just kind of botched everything, or is this something that DFL's better interest to promote the Bundesliga are just going to be continued failed small tours that really gain no traction and make fans just kind of scratch your head and wonder what if.
Yeah, I think that's certainly the case because they didn't promote it well enough, and I think there were some good points in there, and some things that I think would be very helpful for the league and for the non-big clubs, right? Going forward, and those members would see that in action and say, okay, maybe this was a positive thing, but they didn't explain it properly. The rollout was clunky, and the protests just overwhelmed them.
Just the way that they handled it was just, and it's a shame because I think that is something that the Bundesliga clubs could definitely do better. They tried a one-off match in their November, right ahead of the FIFA World Cup, where Stuttgart met Cologne, and the worst they were asked for in Austin, Texas. They thought, hey, we could have thousands of fans show up. Instead, it was a number of Eintracht fans who were in the Eintracht Austin fan club saw the dozens to hundreds of Cologne fans and the dozens of hundreds of Stuttgart fans because it was released in early October. Oh, we're coming here. You're giving yourself 1 month to promote it. You're not kind of working with your broadcast partner to, pump out, the information to the wider, maybe MLS watching public within the state of Texas where, those of German descent can be like, hey, you know what? This could be fun for us to, go celebrate, our Germanic heritage. The rollouts are just, unless you're the big fish, really, it's just, the teams that play in this monikered nickname of a thing called Der Klassiker in Dortmund and Munich. Why is it that the rest of the clubs are currently falling over themselves, that the DFL felt that they needed to come up with ideas to promote themselves?
Yeah. Well, this is also why I think you're seeing clubs like St. Pauli that have the very kind of cultish following all over the country. I mean, I've actually got all over the country in the United States too, I should say. Those clubs that have marketed themselves better have advantages in this market. You see, I mean, Hoffenheim, obviously, we know why they've been able to stay in the top flight for so long. But then, Heidenheim this season, we've seen Bochum. Bochum might stay up again. We've seen Union, who you and I talked about off air. There is certainly more accessibility because some of the smaller clubs have gotten more creative with their roster builds and how they market themselves, which is great.
There's been some times where they try to go the American route, and in some ways it does bring additional highlights to clubs when they're kind of floundering. Like a lot of people, I felt, paid more attention to Schalke themselves because they had Weston McKennie. But, if you're thinking that that's going to suddenly change your club's fortunes, it takes way greater planning to be able to kind of properly execute that sort of thing to be able to have great growth, which is a perfect time to turn to the Eintracht because we talked about it off air and we'll talk about it here. Eintracht showing up in, I should point out, back-to-back Pokal finals. The 17-1 was, I think, a more Cinderella story of a team that never, if we would have gone to Europe that season, that would have been rough going. Let's put it that way. But that 2018 team, you go up against one of the biggest fish that there is. You got Bayern Munich, who, it just ran away with the title. They got close in the Champions another deep run in the Champions League. They go up against a smaller team in Eintracht. They liked what they were seeing in a coach, and they're like, hey, we're going to pilfer you, just like Bayern always does when it comes to whether it be coaches or players. They were pilfering Eintracht for, the good guy that they had in Niko Kovac, but their chance. They won the Pokal, a wonderful celebration, also pretty decently documented in the Amazon Prime This Is Football series on the episode Chance. Also happens to highlight a Bayern failure in the 2012 Champions League final, played in their own backyard. I'll never get tired of rubbing that in their faces. But Kartik, for you as someone who's enjoyed following the Bundesliga, and not as one who's, an out and out, diehard Eintracht fan, how did you see Eintracht going then from strength to strength, a deep run in Europe, and then, a couple years later, the run that takes us to the Pokal, the Europa Pokal final and the Europa League where we won? How have you seen the growth of Eintracht as something that, you could point to a Bremen, you could point to a Stuttgart and say, hey, you can be here. Bring back the old days, and suddenly everyone's talking about you all over again.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, they scouted well. Niko Kovac did a good job. Regardless of what happened at Bayern after and what's happened at Monaco, etc., he did a great job at Eintracht. And then you've seen a club that, quite frankly, now has gotten a lot of good players in the door. And you even look at this year's squad, right? You look at guys like Pacho. He's not a guy that was on most people's radar, right? Tuta is a guy that I think has played really well. Robin Koch gets relegated at Leeds in the Premier League. They pick him up. Götze's had a bit of a revival when he's gotten to Eintracht. So you're looking at a side. And actually, Knopf, let's mention him because he's a guy that I don't think. I think when he was at Dortmund, he couldn't find his feet, and he's been good at times, right? I mean, there's still maybe a gear missing for him since he got to Frankfurt, but I see the upside now. I see how he fits into their system. I also think part of this has been because Eintracht has had a succession of coaches that favor a more attacking style of play, right? So you're talking about a club that is playing on the front foot, so it's attractive for young players. That started again with Kovac, and now Topomula has done a great job of continuing that. So it's a squad that I think plays an open style of football, and then you still have your traditional kind of guys that can do a job. I mean, Acebe is still playing, kind of, right? I mean, that's unbelievable. But he's a winner, right? He's a guy. If you're a young player and you're goofing off, he's in that dressing room. He's going to, put, never mind the coach, right? He's going to put you back in your place. So yeah, I think that their emergence is a really a sign for a blueprint for the Bremens, for the Hamburgs, and for the Schalkes. Now Schalke has had an arrogance about them. For many years. I don't know if that's changing now with their current plight, but Schalke had felt like they could get any young player in the door and kind of just keep going that way. And I understand also the Gazprom sponsorship, the war in Ukraine really has taken a chunk out of Schalke. But those clubs, I mean, we can name them again. I think Hamburg, Bremen, Hanover is another one, right? Hertha, Kaiserslautern, who have won the Bundesliga in 1998. Schalke, among others, could really. I mean, if 1860 could ever get going, right? That's another one.
Another one where I would say is more of a tale that the folks at Hertha probably should have remembered. It's just they're in the second division when the Jordanian prince took over, and he won't leave.
Yep,
he's just hated so much.
Yeah, and they're a club. Let's remember that they had a great deal at the Allianz Arena and had to sell their share back to Bayern. or not back to Bayern. I mean, it was a split. And that's just kind of fed the Bayern monster and put 1860 now as a tenant in all kinds of dire straits financially, which led to all of this other nonsense that's happened.
Yeah, that's another one of the many fallen giants. I think Dusseldorf, if they get promoted and do things, I think the free ticket idea is still kind of marvel. If Dusseldorf somehow, some way, and there's a 6-point gap, and Kiel for second, so I think automatic promotions are kind of outside the possibilities. But I think, if have a playoff that was going to be the most fire that we've ever seen in our entire lives, it will be a matchup between Dusseldorf and Köln, possibly swapping one major city right on the Rhine for the other. The locals who don't like each other whatsoever, that would be, maybe from a selfish standpoint, because that would mean that Mainz goes down, the little plucky team from, a couple miles down the river, along with Darmstadt, who's our Hessen rival. That would, for me, be the dream relegation playoff, because Hamburg's doing a Hamburg. They like Schalke, like Kaiserslautern, like Nuremberg and Hanover, just teams that haven't been, they lost their way and haven't been able to find their way back, despite the fact that, ever since Hamburg was relegated, they basically have been either fourth or third every season, which, okay, that's some consistency, but it kind of doesn't do them justice when you're one of the three most important cities, I would say, in the country of Germany, and neither your Hamburg teams are in the top division. But this is, I really enjoy sometimes the plight of Hamburg, and the sheer fact that St. Pauli, as you mentioned, the cold club, the counterculture club, the club that does market themselves so differently that they draw in so many interested fans and so many fan clubs here, there, and everywhere. It does mean that some clubs who market themselves differently are able, as a Bundesliga club, to just be just that. Something better, something different, that the Bundesliga has got to be rubbing their hands and just thinking, please St. Pauli get up, please St. Pauli get up, because if possibly losing Köln to relegation, a real big, part of the Bundesliga culture, you couldn't ask for someone better in St. Pauli to kind of replace them.
Yeah, no question about that. And I know groups around this country that actually tape the St. Pauli matches and get together later in the day and watch them, right? And they are fanatical, and it will be important, I think, for the Bundesliga's television profile or streaming profile, whatever you want to call it, in this country, since we are obviously talking about ESPN Plus and not necessarily linear television. But I think it's important for the streaming profile of the league to have St. Pauli up and hopefully stay up for the duration of this contract.
100%. I do. Look, I like the story of Kiel going up, first team from Schleswig-Holstein that could possibly be in the Bundesliga, but I feel that the Bundesliga just hurts a little bit when you lose another big fish, and the sheer fact that St. Pauli's there could hamper that setback for the Bundesliga. But I think it provides a real healthy balance of, big teams, if you want to have the grand and glory days of Eintracht, and remember, the late 90s and early 2000s were headache for Eintracht fans. Became an elevator team or yo-yo team, as you possibly say. And it shows like, hey, if you don't have your stuff together, bad things can happen. And that's where we simply see these, quote, fallen giants in Stuttgart. They got everything right. But how long did it take for them to get everything right after getting stuff wrong for so long? And a team who, in the early mid-2000s, was honestly one of the real European heavy hitters when it came to the Bundesliga clubs in Europe.
Yeah. Obviously, 2006, 2007, they win the league, and they have a club that's really really well built. There was a lot of North American angle with the Mexican players they had, and there was a great deal of talk in Mexico even about Pavel Pardo and Ricardo Osorio about how good those two guys were and how great the Bundesliga was for them as players and how it fit the way Mexico's playing style at the time. Stuttgart getting back to where they belong, quite frankly. It's been a remarkable year. I know obviously he's not there anymore, but we have an American manager that brought them up from the second division, and he did a great job. He's part of the story, obviously. Then goes to Hoffenheim after.
Yeah, the Stuttgart story is a little convoluted currently with the exterior investment coming in from Porsche, which had more strings attached than anyone else. So Eintracht at one point they get outside investment, but kept within the parameters of the 50 model, and it's kind of frustrating that a club that could benefit so greatly from that additional investment from a major economic partner in Porsche, and then you qualify for Europe, that you got shenanigans going around in the background that are kind of causing issue, causing the fans to be upset, causing the boardroom to, for me, they finally get stuff, looks like it's getting all back together, and you're almost kind of hitting a self-destruct button, which is something that I put all at the blame of why Hamburg eventually kind of went the way that they did, and Hanover had, for them, though, kind of retooler, and Martin Kind, there's a kind of different story. But Kartik, one thing that I have really been wanting to talk to you about, and you hinted it, gave me an opening for it, is ESPN Plus has been and ESPN itself, with a couple of games that are on ESPN2, and I think a handful of games that have been on ABC. ESPN has been a quite, I would say, moderate upgrade of a partner due to accessibility to the league than their previous agreement with Fox was. Obviously, way fewer games shown on television than streaming, but that's just kind of the reach that ESPN had at that moment in time. And I would still say currently that they have over Fox, despite Fox being still trying to be a major player in the soccer landscape. The ESPN has, I think, one more season on their current contract, or maybe they have a second one. Maybe I got my numbers wrong there. What is the future of the Bundesliga line? Because I keep on hearing this fruit company is interested, and I don't really like the sound of it.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens with the domestic TV rights deal, because DAZN is now very agitated, and there's controversy about that situation. And if there is a domestic rights deal of any kind, I think Apple may not be interested. So that's the thing. Apple wants global rights. Maybe they would accept a domestic cutout, but I don't think it's in the Bundesliga's interest to go to Apple because they have such a lucrative domestic television market. Now, for the French league, I think it's different. I think Ligue 1 has to explore it. I think the Eredivisie, those sorts of leagues that aren't generating as much revenue from their domestic deals have to explore it. But in terms of, and that was the case with MLS. Let's be honest about it. They weren't going to generate any revenue from their domestic deal. I think we're looking at potentially a move to Paramount Plus, depending on what they're willing to spend. If not, it will probably stay with ESPN and ESPN Plus. I don't know what kind of revenue they'll get in terms of. I don't know that ESPN will pay more. Maybe they'll get more ABC broadcast windows. That would be nice. More matches on linear television. Go from the 5 a season they have now, 4 or 5 a season, to maybe 8 or 10. Maybe that's the best we're looking at realistically. Although the Leverkusen story helps, and I think having St. Pauli up will help. So maybe there's incentive to go further with this thing. We see, unfortunately, for the Bundesliga and for the other leagues on the continent, sort of a dominance of the Premier League in the American television space, right? I mean, obviously there's a lot of stuff on streaming, but in terms of linear television, there are over 100 Premier League games a year on linear television, something like 150 Premier League games a year on linear television, 38 or more matches. I think it's 42 this year, actually, 42 matches on over the air on NBC. So, yeah, unfortunately, you're not going to match that. I mean, that's just, that's kind of like the NBA or the NFL, really, when you think about it. Like the kind of, not in terms of viewership, but just in terms of the number of games the Premier League gets on American television. It's difficult. It's kind of crowding out the soccer space. Which again, right? I'm not expressing an opinion on it one way or another. I'm just saying it's difficult for. It's difficult for the Bundesliga. It's difficult for La Liga and the other leagues. It's great for the Premier League, obviously.
Where do you think then the preferred location would be? Oh, look, we're both talking from an American standpoint. We got European listeners who are like, "Oh gosh, you guys are able to watch so much more than us, unless we just, overload ourselves with buying the cable packages and not going to the bar or going all to a friend's house that Europeans have because the accessibility is distinctly different."
Yeah.
I think that the smartest thing is for the Bundesliga, for just a viable asset in terms of that, to stay in the ESPN space, because whilst Apple, I think, is an absolutely horrible idea, I think Paramount's, not too bad, but I would actually want to look at, Turner Sports in terms of, that's where currently the NBA, NHL, or at least part of both of those guys kind of go through. So we're currently in the midst of the first rounds of each of those playoffs, and you've got games on streaming on their platform Max that are available in addition to at the same time that they're on TBS and TNT. And this is all the same platforms that with CBS's help for the March Madness, could that be possibly an avenue that the Bundesliga takes? Or do you think that they're honestly going to look to just the highest bidder, which is what took them from Gold TV way back in the day to then Fox and then to ESPN?
I think ESPN is probably still the best bet in terms of where they are realistically. It would be wonderful to say, it'd be great to get on NBC or get on CBS. But CBS is a possibility. But I think CBS, as we've seen with Serie A, they'll bury you completely on streaming or on CBS Sports Network, which doesn't quite have the reach that the ESPN networks do. And even like the algorithm for when I'm on Paramount Plus, I get recommended the USL games and whatever else they might have going on before I get recommended the Serie A matches. So I'm not sure about that. Although it's possible the Bundesliga does better than Serie A in terms. I mean, it's a completely different league, right? The atmospheres and ambiances and just the grounds, the way the game is set up in Germany is the opposite of Italy. Italy is a league where billionaires control each club. There's kind of really a dead feel. I mean, the attendances have come back up the last few years, but Italian football really went through a period where attendances were declining, interest domestically was declining. There are tracks around half the pitches. So I think as a television product, Germany is much better. So maybe CBS does a better job with it, honestly, because CBS has done a great job with most things. It's just I know Serie A is not happy with what's happened on CBS, but maybe that's more Serie A issue than a CBS issue. So, yeah, I would say my preferences would be 1 ESPN, 2 CBS. Obviously, don't want to go back to Fox and don't want to be on Apple.
Yeah, Fox, I honestly think had Fox not lost to Turner Sports, and Turner Sports did a horrible job, before they did a horrible job with the Champions League. Had Fox maintained their grasp on the Champions League, I think the Bundesliga would have stayed with Fox, because they would have said, hey, here's a partner who's all about the European game because they have the European matches. This is an easy plug for, the more European connoisseurs who want to sink their teeth into the Bundesliga rather than, not getting direct, not knowing where to go for their weekend viewing. If they're, a casual fan who's like, I like these European, there's plenty of casual soccer fans in the United States who watch the European action because they know that it's pan-continental activity, and people have such a fascination for just European anything that I think that's a pulling point to the Champions League that the Premier League doesn't necessarily have, but it's not as big of a mover in terms of eyeballs that just the Anglo obsession that is that contributes to the Premier League. And yeah, it's just one wish that if I could go back in time, just making sure that Fox didn't lose that, because I think then there would have at some point been a bigger force to push Fox into the streaming landscape that then would have meant that they'd be able to more compete in the sports broadcasting landscape market without having it kind of divulge into half a million different streaming platforms in spaces where soccer is available. Whilst widely available, still so much more for the average fan to have to fork over to be able to take all of it in. But maybe that's just me.
Yeah. I do think, unfortunately, we do have to be realistic with where this league is. And we'll have I think we'll be in a position maybe in a year to know better. Now, the ESPN deal, I've heard various things. Is it 5 years? Is it 6 years? Now, I thought it was 5 years, which would mean we have 1 year left. It was actually someone at the network that corrected me and said it was 6 years. So I believe now, based on that, we have 2 years left, which gives us a year with St. Pauli, maybe 2 years with St. Pauli, and a couple more years with this Leverkusen team if they can keep it together. And that might increase the interest among network bidders.
Oh, that would definitely do that. Everyone a good case on that. All I have to say to ESPN, if there's any executive listening, can you go back and get more archive, soccer made in Germany matches? That's just fun stuff to watch back in a totally different era, and some of the hairstyles are just fabulous. Because let's be real, as both me and Kartik are aging, we'll look back at some of those guys and probably think, oh, those were the days. But hey, Kartik, it's been fun having you on. One thing that I'd like to have you answer for us as we kind of close our discussion here on the Bundesliga, on Eintracht, on just the German football landscape here, Kartik. If we can get you to be on the spot and give us a prediction, will any of the three German clubs currently in European competition be lifting silverware, and why?
Yeah, Leverkusen is going to win the Europa League, I believe. They've got, obviously, AS Roma in the semifinals, same team that eliminated them last year. Then you've got a situation where they're going to get Atalanta, who I really like, or Marseille. I think Leverkusen they limit the opponent's opportunities because they keep the ball and they move so well and they have so much depth that Atalanta is fighting for a Champions League spot in Italy. They're not as deep. They're actually a really good story in terms of Italian football and how much they've sold, how many players they've sold through onward. So I like Leverkusen. In terms of Champions League, Real Madrid always gets these breaks for some reason in Champions League. So I don't expect Bayern to beat them. They might outplay them, but they won't get past them. I mean, we've seen this before. I mean, we saw 1 year, I think, where they played Chelsea, Manchester City, and Liverpool in succession, right? And they were not as good as any of those three sides in terms of those ties, and they still advanced. And saw it again against Manchester City in the last round. So it happened actually against Bayern several years ago, too, for Real Madrid. I mean, they just seem to be very resourceful in this competition. In terms of Dortmund and PSG, that's really I think Dortmund has a great chance to win that, but then if they do get past that, Real Madrid is it just feels like they're going to win Champions League because that's what happens in these situations, right? They just always win, and it's annoying. It also, to me, kind of devalues European competition to a certain extent because there seems to be this continued situation where they are constantly winning this competition year in and year out. Well, this year they're going to win La Liga also, but in many of the seasons that they won the competition, they finished second or third in La Liga, and been quite poor, and they just get results in this tournament. So, so we're going to say Leverkusen wins the Europa League.
Oh, that can work out for me. They've broken the Leverkusen curse, and you know what? If they lift the treble, you know what? It's more than well deserved. All right, Kartik, where can we find you in the social media landscape of the world? I know you're a very busy guy and got so many projects going. What would you like us to pump up?
Yeah, so you can find me on social media at KKFLA737. You can subscribe to my newsletter, which has a bunch of writers. I mean, I run the site, but we have a bunch of writers at beyondthe90.substack.com. There is a paid component to that. 95% of the content is free. So if you just sign up for the free subscription, you'll get 95% of the stuff. If you want to help us out or you want to get that extra 5%, which is usually just reporting like more, hey, my sources tell me this is going to happen type of thing. Those are the things that go behind the paywall. You can do that. And then, of course, there's always worldsoccertalk.com and the worldsoccertalk.com, not worldsoccertalk.com podcast, the World Soccer Talk podcast.
But yeah, and that's how I came across you and suddenly realized, wow, Dan's got some insight, folks. Kartik, thanks again for joining the podcast. And folks, where can you find the podcast? That is on any of your platforms where you download podcasts as Hey Eintracht Frankfurt on Twitter, or X it is currently known as at HEFpod, Hey Eintracht Frankfurt on Instagram, and of course, Facebook.com/HEFpod. So from us here, thanks for having Kartik to join us here for this fun little discussion on the Bundesliga and Eintracht, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers. Hey, Eintracht Frankfurt, Hey, Eintracht Frankfurt,